What is going on, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another Tux Care stream. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good all of the things. Wherever you're at, hopefully you're staying hydrated. I got my favorite flavored sparkling water. It's the best out there. I'm just going to say that. Cheers to you. Let's make sure that we're staying hydrated. If you are new to the stream, I am your resident senior developer advocate, Chris Demars, working at Tux Care. You know it's Tux Care because you were on the Tux Care stream. And we have a pretty cool episode today, a really, really cool stream. I am going to bring up Scott Covert, and we are going to talk a little bit about Salesforce security.
Hi,
What
Chris.
is going on, Scott? How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on today.
Hey, thanks for taking the time to do this, not just for myself and Tux Care, but the community as a whole. It's really, really appreciated.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it and looking forward to the conversation.
Same. So let's get a little rundown. Tell us who you are and what you do and all of the cool things.
Sure. Yes. So I've been working in the Salesforce space now for over 15 years. And at Python specifically, we focus on developing customizations, integrations, and applications for the Salesforce platform that are secure. And right now, that's a very hot topic in the Salesforce community because you and some of your listeners may already be aware that there were a number of data breaches in the Salesforce ecosystem that were announced over the summer. And being such a popular platform, it's always a target for hackers. Now, I will say that in my opinion, Salesforce's platform is actually one of the most secure out there that I've come across. But it's also one of the most customizable. And so if Salesforce admins and professionals aren't careful with how they're doling out permissions, if they aren't running regular audits of their org, then they can be susceptible to the kinds of attacks that we've seen recently.
Yeah, that's one of the things I talk about I do a conference talk, and I've written an article about SBOMs, software bill of materials.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of that has to do with, running those audits and checking for CVE vulnerabilities and stuff like that, and being able to generate those SBOMs, or even running like an audit within your SBOM to make sure that you're secure. Is there a lot of SBOM work in the Salesforce ecosystem?
Well, there are more and more vendors now getting into that space. Salesforce, of course, is always taking security very seriously, and they're starting to build out more tools and provide more support and training to users out there for sure. Yeah,
that's awesome. No, that's great.
So what I was hoping to do today, Chris, if you'll humor me, one of the main breaches that happened over the summer that was announced by Google's security research team involved essentially social engineering and exploiting a connected app that uses the OAuth device flow. And what I was hoping to do today was kind of role play. I'll play the hacker. You play the victim at my target organization, and I can walk the listeners through exactly how this hack took place. Does that sound cool to you?
That sounds awesome. Before we get that started, I just want to drop a couple social links. If you're not following TuxCare on Twitter, definitely give us a follow on Twitter. If you're not following me, your boy, on Twitter, make sure you give me a follow, Sultan Burnham. Make sure that you're following Scott on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Scott Reed Covert. And then you wanted to plug a podcast, right? The App Assembly Line podcast. Definitely give that a look.
That's right. I appreciate that, Chris. Thanks so much. Yeah, and I'm very active on LinkedIn, and the podcast is great for anyone in the Salesforce space. So would happy to have anybody listen to that.
Awesome. Well, let's get into it, buddy.
Yeah. Okay. So first off, the hackers really only needed a few things to gain this access to the org. And first off, it should. I'm going to keep using this term hack, but really, again, this was a social engineering vulnerability. And so one of your best lines of defense is keeping your org secure and your employees trained to prevent this kind of thing. They didn't exactly find a vulnerability in the platform itself, right? So what they were doing was they were phoning up employees at their target organization and tricking them into authorizing their machine to gain access to the Salesforce API, which of course, obviously they should never have gotten. But once they had that, then they were able to export all this sensitive business data from the org. A lot of listeners are probably aware Salesforce started out solely in CRM. A lot of companies now are running all different aspects of their business on that platform, and so there's a lot of sensitive data there to be protected.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, sorry. Finish
no,
what you
go
were going
ahead.
to say. No, I was gonna say that I love talking about hacking and social engineering. And when I was a kid, so I've been building websites. I've been a front end developer for 30 years. I've been a developer advocate for a long time as well. But I started back in 95, 96. And the whole reason I started, well, I had a computer early on and it ran DOS and there wasn't much you could do with it. You could play Hangman and Tetris and cool stuff like that. There's a word processor. But one of the main reasons that I really got heavy into all of this was because of the movie Hackers. I wanted to be a hacker when I was a kid, right?
Hack the
And
planet.
Hack the Planet. So it's funny. I'm going to go off on a tangent. So we have in here in Michigan, we have Motor City Comic Con. We have it twice a year. And Matt Lillard, he's originally from Michigan, and he's going to be here this weekend actually because it's this weekend. He comes back. He comes every year to do autograph signings at Comic Con. And it was last year, no, 2 years ago, I went, and you would think like, oh, Chris is, because I'm a big horror fan. Like that's my life is horror movies and stuff in the paranormal world. You would think like, oh, Chris is going to get some Scream stuff signed. No, the first thing that I got signed, I made sure I went to McDonald's and I got an empty fry container, a flat fry container, and got it signed by Matt Lillard. And he didn't even know why I was getting it signed until I brought up the scene when they're in like the virtual retro arcade and they're eating the fries and he's stealing everybody's fries on the table. He was
Oh,
like, "Oh
yes.
yeah," right?
It didn't click for me until you brought that up, but yes, now I do remember that. That's
Right, and
great.
he starts arguing. He's, "Oh, I'm gonna hit you," and I was like, "Duh, come on, man." He's like, "Oh yeah, I forget." So he signed it. He signed "Hack the Planet" on it, and I have it framed. And then I went back and got another autograph. I had to get a Scream autograph too. But no, Hackers is a great movie. I have another hacker thing I want to get signed this weekend because I'm going to go to Comic Con. But I always love the scene in the beginning of Hackers where Dade calls up the TV station and he says, he's so and so, and he needs the number on the modem, and the security guard has no idea what he's like. He thinks he's a real person, and he gets the number
Right.
to the modem, gets into the TV network, and then starts switching out TV channels. And so yeah, so that's always been a fun thing that I've loved about social engineering. It's just people can fall for. There's people are gullible, and
Yeah.
that's why security training is so important, not just for large organizations, but any organization, because anybody can be infiltrated with someone that is extremely convincing.
Yeah, you have to be so careful. And this attack in particular too, I mean, they were simulating actually a valid connected app, and which a connected app is Salesforce's terminology for like an OAuth client configuration. The hackers hadn't even really created their own. They were gaining access to the org on behalf of this valid connected app that's very popular in the Salesforce space. So a lot of they did a good job of kind of covering their tracks, I think, specifically.
Wow.
And I feel like maybe I know a lot of your listeners are very tech savvy, but just maybe some laying down some groundwork would be helpful. Some of the terms. So I keep mentioning OAuth, right, and the OAuth device flow. So OAuth stands for the Open Authorization Protocol. Its first iteration was developed in 2007. 2012, they came out with OAuth 2. And something that's very important, it's almost going back to your hacker's analogy here, where he phones in and he's not who he says he is. OAuth, the auth stands again for authorization, not authentication. So this protocol is only allowing a user to grant access to a third-party client to a resource server, such as like the Salesforce API, without having to share their credentials.
Mm-hmm.
It authorizes a client to act on behalf of a user, but it does not do any authentication. There's something called the OpenID Connect protocol that's built on top of OAuth. That's for authentication. verifying someone is who they say they are. But the OAuth, it doesn't verify they are who they say they are. And
Right.
that's kind of where it goes back to the phone call, right, in hackers. So the other term I mentioned, the device flow. So over the years, a number of different flavors of OAuth have been used to support various integration instances. So one case is when you have a device that you need to grant access to an API that has either limited or perhaps even no user interface that a user could interact with in order to authorize that API access. You can then instead leverage a second device to grant the authorization. This is probably sounding a little bit confusing how to follow, but a lot of folks use this OAuth flow every day when they use their Roku. So you pull up a new streaming service on your Roku device, and what does it say? It says, hey, go to this website on your phone or on your computer and enter in this 5-digit code. Why? Because nobody really likes typing with the Roku remote, right? It's kind of a clunky UI. So the OAuth device flow is set up for those situations where the actual device, in this case the Roku, that needs access to the service has a lousy interface, and so the authorization takes place on a secondary device. So what the hackers were doing in the Salesforce instance was initiating the OAuth flow from their own machine and then calling up their victim and having them run through the actual approval on their device. And then back on the hacker's machine, suddenly now they have access to the Salesforce API. So the first step they would always need to do is like figure out the specific Salesforce domain that their target runs on, their victim organization runs on. That's not very difficult to figure out because most people just name it after their company. You can run a real quick curl command and see whether or not you've guessed correctly what your victim's instance URL is. But Coca-Cola's is just Coca-Cola, right? A lot of these victims of this hack were Fortune 500 organizations, very, very large enterprises where you can easily guess. And then the only other bit of information that the hackers really needed was the client ID of the connected app that they were spoofing. In this case, they were spoofing a connected app used for a desktop application that a lot of admins like to use for importing and exporting data. They were able to get that pretty easily because that desktop application is open source. And so they could see in the GitHub repository the actual client ID of the connected app that's powering it. But as I'm going to show today, you don't even really need you just need to curl commands. You don't need to use like a desktop application. The fact that this one app was open source is kind of a red herring. And the client ID in OAuth is not really a secret. You normally have a consumer key and consumer secret. I'll use the terms consumer key and client ID interchangeably here, but it's not really meant to be protected. The OAuth device flow is unique in that you don't really need that consumer secret value when you're running through the OAuth flow. So the hackers then had all they needed, right? They know the instance URL of their target because it's a huge org like Coca-Cola or Delta, so they know exactly what the instance URL is going to be, and they know the client ID of the Connect app they're going to spoof. In this case, the one powering a data loader desktop application. So what I'm going to share my screen in a minute here, Chris. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a curl command to initiate the OAuth device flow. And that's going to then give me back two codes, one of which is a very user-friendly 5-digit code that is meant to be used to go actually perform the authorization. The other code is used for polling to see whether or not a user has actually granted access yet.
Awesome.
And one thing I want people to keep in mind while they're going through this, because I know that this is getting a little heavy on the technical side. It's probably nothing for your listeners, but even still, what this data breach amounts to at the end of the day is keeping in mind the Roku analogy, let's say I want to watch Ted Lasso, okay, and I don't have an Apple TV subscription, but I know that you do, Chris. All I need to do is pull up the Apple TV app on my Roku, and then when I see that 5-digit code, I call my friend Chris and I say, "Hey, Chris, I'm having something weird's going on with my Apple TV. Do you mind going to this site and just entering this code and tell me if it works for you?" And then you run through that, and suddenly, boom, I can now watch Ted Lasso on my Roku. That ultimately is what they did at the end of the day. It's just replace Roku with Salesforce.
Yeah.
Or replace Apple TV with Salesforce. Yeah. So, okay, let me. Yeah, so you sufficiently scared yet?
A little bit. It's extremely intuitive, but wow, that's smart.
All right, so let me pull up terminal here. Okay, so paste in this command here, and I'll walk us through what I'm doing here first. So this initial part, I'm just going to run a basic curl command. This right here is just meant to run the request through Tor, which would obfuscate my IP address. So if any admin were going into the login history, they wouldn't see my true IP. A lot of hackers like to use Tor and things like that and VPNs to prevent folks from figuring out where they're actually based out of. This right here is the instance URL to a Salesforce org that I created already for you, Chris, to leverage for this hack. And then this is just a parameter to say that we're running through the device code, OAuth flow, and here's the client ID for my connected app, the consumer key for my OAuth client configuration. Again, hackers figured this out just by looking at the repo. There are other ways to easily figure out what an OAuth connected apps client ID is, because it's not meant to be really a secret. So I'll run this command. Might take a little bit of time. Oh, that was pretty fast. Sometimes it takes a little time to run through Tor. So here's my response back. I got this user code, and this is what I'm going to hand off to you, Chris, to enter in a moment here. And here's this device code. This is obviously not very user-friendly. This is what's used to be running polling. This is the URL that I'm going to hand off to you in a second, Chris, to go through and authorize my API access. But before I do that, I'm going to run another curl command just to show that we don't yet have access to the org. Okay, so again, running this command through Tor, I'm hitting the instance URL for the org that we had set up before, doing the device OAuth flow. Here's that same client ID. And now I'm also using the code that I just got back from my other request, the device code. So I get back, as expected, an error that the user has not yet approved access. So this is now when I'm going to call up my victim. I'm going to call up my buddy Chris, and I'm going to ask him, I'm going to impersonate IT and say like, "Hey, Chris, this is James from IT, and we're needing to do some SOC 2 compliance audits. We need access to the Salesforce org through this data loader app. Could you please go to this site and go ahead and authorize them for us? I'd really appreciate it." So let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I'm going to give you the URL that I'd shared before, Chris.
All right, let's see here.
And give me just a moment.
Yep.
What was that user code? Okay, I dropped it into the chat. So maybe, Chris, if you don't mind, if you could take over the screen share now, just to show folks what that would look like on your end, on the victim's end.
Yep, let me do that real quick. So let's see. I'll share my screen. New tab. Go here, copy.
Perfect. Okay, so I even went ahead and pre-filled the code for you there. But this is the equivalent of I think Apple. When I was mentioning Apple TV before, I think it's just link.apple.com. These are not like an authenticated site. But then once you hit connect, if you weren't already logged into Salesforce, you'd be asked to. You're already logged in, I know, to that org, so you're just going straight to this OAuth approval flow. Now, this is where you can see at the top it says data loader is asking to, and it listed out the different OAuth scopes. But that's where I've now that you've just provided that approval, my machine, because my machine initiated it, my machine now has access to your Salesforce API, and I can show that.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to steal back the light if that's all right.
Yep. Let me take this off. I'll remove this. And when you're ready, I will add you back.
Cool. Let's see. All right. Should have my screen again, I think, right?
Nope, not yet.
Oh, no. Okay. Now you got it?
Yep.
Cool. All right. So now if I run this again, the same command from before, I should actually get access. And there we go. We got our access token is right here and our refresh token. This is very scary because the refresh tokens by default, unless the admin has made some changes for most connected apps, they don't ever expire. And so while an access token will last at most 24 hours, I can always just use a refresh token to generate a new access token to maintain access. And honestly, this was a very long-running hack. It was the hackers sat on their access for a while before they really started doing some data dumps. But now I can show that I can prove that I have access to the org too. I'm just going to run one last curl command here using that access token. And so this command that I'm running, again, running it through Tor, hitting that instance URL that we know. I'm specifically hitting a Salesforce API meant to run a query against the data. Salesforce calls it SOQL. It's very similar to a SQL query language. So you can see I'm basically requesting the first and last name of all users in the organization. So I just need to copy in that access token. And escape that exclamation point. And here we can see we got you right there. These are some of the other default users that are put into that org. So now imagine if I'm pulling in account info, opportunity info,
right,
all customer info, all the things that are stored in Salesforce. By default, those are some of the main tables that are in an org. But like I said before, a lot of companies are running a lot more than just CRM in their Salesforce instance. And so you can pull down a lot of sensitive data. And that's exactly what these hackers did. So pretty scary stuff.
Yeah.
So but it's not all doom and gloom. Okay. So first off, I do want to talk about what folks can do to mitigate and prevent these hacks so they don't fall victim to them. But I do just want to quickly run through some of the other vulnerabilities that we've seen at Tython in a lot of orgs. So first off, there was the second hack announced or data breach announced about a month later that affected SalesLoft. I think that made a lot of headlines. Something that was confusing, I think, is it happened right on the heels of this announcement, and so there were a lot of folks conflating the details of the two. This was a social engineering attack that exploited the device OAuth flow. With SalesLoft, OAuth tokens came into play again, but it was more a supply chain attack. So SalesLoft had a GitHub repository that was compromised. And as a result of that, hackers were able to gain access to their AWS instance, where their Drift application was storing OAuth tokens, not just to Salesforce orgs, but to a lot of other platforms too, like Google Workspace. So that hack ended up really blowing up. And then one other vulnerability that we see a lot at Tython has to do with customer portals built on top of the Salesforce platform. In Salesforce world, they refer to them as digital experience sites, formerly known as communities. But these are portals that can expose some Salesforce data intentionally to customers. You can think of like a knowledge base, where folks can go and get information on knowledge articles or submit new cases, see resolutions to cases they've submitted before, that kind of thing. A lot of times admins inadvertently will grant excessive permissions to these users, and then they're able to pull down a lot more a lot more data than they should be able to. So that's something else we've seen. Yeah. So I'm also happy to I'm happy to run through some mitigation steps, because again, it's not all doom and gloom. If you're down for that, Chris.
Yeah, let's definitely do it for sure.
Okay. So I mentioned at the beginning, one thing you really need to be doing is auditing your org, right? You need to be going through and getting a grasp on all the permissions that are granted to all your different Salesforce users, especially those users that are accessing Salesforce portals, those community users. And you want to make sure that you're following the principle of least privilege. So folks should not be gaining access to any data that they don't absolutely need. That's step one. I mean, the hack that we just went through, your user in particular was a sysadmin, so they pretty much have carte blanche to the org. But if they had gained access to another user with less permissions, they wouldn't actually be able to see anything that user couldn't normally access themselves. OAuth, you're still creating those API requests on behalf of that user, so those user permissions are followed. So as long as you're following principle of least privilege, not granting excessive permissions, that can really go a long way. You should be running audits of all your connected apps. Again, those are the OAuth client configurations for third parties to access Salesforce APIs. You should be running audits of that in addition to your permissions. In fact, and I can share my screen one last time here.
Definitely.
And just pull up. This is the Salesforce instance that we just hacked here. At Tython, we did build actually a free audit tool that folks can use to get a grasp on their connected apps and everything that has authorization to their org. Because what's scary, I think, is over the years, a lot of different third parties gain access to the APIs, and people move roles. Sometimes people forget where who granted this access, and it's still just floating around out there, and you really need to manually revoke it. So we built a tool to help folks go in and audit and remove any access they don't need. So here this is the connected app that I just used to gain access to your org. I could see all the different users that have gained access, and I could revoke that if need be. And whoops. We also highlight anything that leverages the device flow, because the device flow is a particularly vulnerable point for orgs. So we wanted to highlight that. So anyways, folks can access this if they want. You can go to freeaudit.permissionsassistant.com, and you can check out all the different things that have access to your org, because you might be surprised. You could I also recommend going through and getting a general grasp on all the permission sets and profiles in a Salesforce org. And that's something that we also built a tool for called Permissions Assistant that folks can leverage to help them there. With respect to connected apps specifically, I really recommend folks not allow users to self-authorize and instead limit access only to specific profiles and permission sets for a given connected app, so that not everyone in your org can grant API access to a particular instance or a particular connected app. And I also recommend enforcing things like IP restrictions, setting expiration policies on those refresh tokens that we talked about before. There's a number of different things you can do to lock down your org. And these are all things that we work through with our clients. So and the other hack I mentioned that fell victim to SalesLoft, or that SalesLoft fell victim to, that is important not just to do an internal audit, but to also do audits of the vendors that you're bringing in, right? So you want to make sure that they're compliant with all industry standards. That if they do have an integration, you want to make sure that they're storing your OAuth tokens in an encrypted way. You want to make sure they're following the principle of least privilege, so that not every developer in their organization could get access to those tokens and go rogue and gain access to your work. So those are some of the different ways that Salesforce admins can stay safe.
That's awesome. Yeah, my girlfriend, she is a senior Salesforce admin for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, and that's kind of how I've been in the Ohana Slack, and that's how you and I got connected. So I know I think she was trying to tune in on the TuxCare YouTube or LinkedIn to watch this and send it out to the rest of the admins, because this is extremely valuable in my opinion, especially when it comes to security, and then kind of having the merging of Salesforce and security together. I think a lot of people, especially in the admin space, will get a lot of benefit out of that specifically.
Yes. Yeah. No. It's daunting. I mean, honestly, more and more is asked of folks like your girlfriend, senior Salesforce admins. There's more and more on their shoulders these days.
Yeah.
When I got started in the ecosystem, there was much less expected of them. I feel like the lines are blurring between admin and developer these days in the Salesforce ecosystem, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. She just, I'm going to give her a plug. She just got her Agentforce certification the other day. So
Nice.
stoked for
No,
that.
and that's another thing, right? Another expectation
Right.
of admins is they got to basically be developers these days. They've got to also
Yeah.
be AI experts these days. So
Yeah.
there's a lot on their shoulders. So I mean, that's why at Python we're trying to build solutions to help folks
Yeah.
wrestle with all this, because it is a lot. It's a lot.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, I guess like the last question I have for you, Scott, is can you teach me to be a hacker?
Oh man, maybe I can teach you how not to allow your Salesforce instance to be hacked. How about that?
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. One announcement: we are not going to be streaming next week. Me and a few other of my team members, we are going to be at Supercomputing next week in St. Louis. We're going to have a booth there. We're not doing any talks, but we will not be streaming next week. We will be at Supercomputing in St. Louis. So come by the booth. We'll have some swag. Come and hang out and see what we're all about, what we're doing over at TuxCare. Once again, thanks again, Scott, for the time and doing this. I'm glad we were able to connect on the Ohana Slack. Shout out to the Ohana Slack. Ohana means family. If you know, you know. And is there anything that you want to plug before we end the stream?
Well, yeah, maybe let me just share a QR code that I made. So if folks go here, they should be able to see a few different links, like the connected app audit tool I showed, our permissions assistant application. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm very active on LinkedIn, or you could just shoot me a note at scott@permissionsassistant.com.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I'm going to leave this up before we end the stream. Once again, thanks, Scott. Let's do this again. Next time there's a breach, or even if there's not a breach, we can just talk about fun admin Salesforce stuff. It's totally cool for me. I love all types of technology. So
that'd be great. I'd love it. Thanks so much for having me on, Chris.
Appreciate it, Scott. With that, we are out of here. Once again, no stream next week, but make sure that you check out the TuxCare socials for the announcement for the next stream. We are booked till the end of the year, and then beginning of next year, I'll send out a calendar invite. So if anybody wants to come on the stream, join the stream, have something cool to talk about, or just want to hang out in general, let your boy know, and we will get you on. With that being said, we are out in 3, 2, 1.